I had studied abroad for 4 years, and the second I landed in Seattle, someone stopped me at my own door. She stood on the porch, looked me over, and told me I was at the wrong house. Before I could even speak, she walked down the steps and slapped me in front of everyone. My name is Emily Foster. I had just come back from Boston, dragging 2 suitcases behind me like I didn't belong there. I stood at the door without moving. My face was still burning, and people around us had already started whispering under their breath. "You don't live here?" Her voice was flat, like she was handling a problem she had dealt with 100 times. She just smiled a little, the kind of smile people give when they think you're pathetic. The staff on the porch stopped what they were doing. Someone pulled out a phone. Nobody stepped in, they just watched. She took a step back and said, "If you don't leave, I'm calling security." I looked down at my phone. The address was right. The property email was still there. The timestamp was from 4 years ago. I started walking forward again, and she moved immediately to block my path. "Don't." This time her voice dropped lower, like it was supposed to sound like a warning. Or maybe a threat. I didn't stop. I walked into the recognition zone and pressed my hand against the scanner. The door unlocked. The air went still for a second, like the whole place had been strangled silent. Her face changed instantly. "Stop her." 2 security guards rushed over, their footsteps quick and hard across the stone. "Ma'am, step outside." I didn't move. I only looked at them and said, "Check it." They didn't react right away. One of them lifted his radio and said, "Can you pull up the property record?" She frowned immediately. No need. But it was already too late. On the other end of the radio, I could hear papers being pulled and flipped through. The sound dragged on long enough to make the air feel unstable. She stepped forward again. "You're wasting time." Nobody answered her. The voice on the radio went quiet for a second, then came back lower. "Wait, the owner is Emily Foster." Nobody said a word. Every eye turned to me. And then to her. Her expression looked stuck, like something inside her had suddenly jammed. "That's not possible." Her voice had gone tight. The guards didn't move. One of them asked another question. "Can you confirm the transfer date?" More papers turned on the other end. 4 years ago. I still said nothing. I just stood there and let everything begin collapsing on its own. She let out a strange little laugh. Rigid. Wrong. She could have hacked that. No one responded. One of the guards looked at her, and even his tone had changed now. "Ma'am, do you have documentation?" She didn't. That was when I walked forward again. As I passed her, she didn't try to stop me. She moved to him instantly, like she had just spotted a lifeline. She broke in. He said it quickly. "Call the police." I stopped walking and turned to look at him. "Ryan." He frowned like my face meant nothing to him. "Do I know you?" Someone nearby laughed under their breath. I looked at him and didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked, "Do you remember the year your father almost lost everything?" His expression froze. I kept going. "Do you remember who fixed it?" He didn't speak. He only stared at me, like he was trying to remember and trying not to. I tapped the intercom and said, "Replay the last 30 seconds. There was a pause on the other end. Then the audio came through the speakers. She broke in. "Call the police." Clear enough for everyone standing there to hear every word of it. His face changed. I looked at him and said, "You said it fast." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She started panicking. That doesn't mean. No one even looked at her. I walked inside. When I passed him, I stopped for just 1 second. "You didn't forget me." I held his gaze. "You just needed me to be nobody." Then I kept walking. The door shut behind me, and the noise outside dropped low, pressing through the cracks like wind. I stood in the living room. The walls were covered with photographs. She was in every single one of them, standing exactly where I should have been. She leaned against Ryan, dressed in my style, using my furniture, smiling like she belonged there. The glass felt cold in my hand. I stared at her face, then at Ryan's. He was smiling the same way he used to. But that smile wasn't for me anymore. Placed the picture face down on the table. There was a date written on the back. 3 years ago, at that time. I was still in Boston. I kept flipping through the others. 2 years ago, last year, every photo had her in it. None of them had me, but I knew exactly who those places had originally belonged to. I walked toward the study. The door was locked. A second earlier, she had tried to keep me away from that room. I stopped for one beat, then entered the code, 4 digits. The door opened. Inside, everything was too neat. Not staged in a hurry. Occupied overtime. Files were stacked neatly on the desk. I opened the first one. Her name. Her identification. Bank records, insurance documents, tax filings. Everything belonged to her. I kept turning pages until I hit one that made me stop completely. Transfer agreement, signed, Emily Foster. I stared at the signature. It wasn't mine. But every stroke looked frighteningly close, like someone had practiced it for years. My fingers slowly curled into my palm. Then someone knocked on the door outside, softly. I didn't move. The door opened anyway. It was one of the security guards from outside. He stayed in the doorway and didn't step in. "Ma'am, you might want to see this." I walked back out. There were more people at the front now. One of them was a lawyer in a sharp suit. The moment he saw me, he smiled. "Miss Foster?" I didn't respond. He handed me a document. Guardianship order. I frowned. His voice stayed calm, almost clinical. 2 years ago, you were legally declared missing." The air turned cold again. He continued. "Your assets were transferred to a lawful proxy." I looked at him and asked who. He stepped aside. She was standing there, no longer panicked. In fact, she was smiling now. Me. The silence that followed felt exactly like the one from earlier. As if the same moment had happened twice, I smiled back a little, then explained something. I looked straight at her. "Why am I standing here right now?" She didn't answer. The lawyer spoke first. "We'll need to begin identity verification again." He said it cleanly, like this was nothing more than procedure. I nodded. Then I lifted my phone. "What about this?" I opened the video. The footage was blurry, but the voices were clear. "She's not dead yet." Her voice. Then Ryan's. "She's not coming back." "Then keep using her identity. The paperwork is already prepared. We only need a death confirmation." The entire scene exploded. Someone gasped. Someone stepped back. I turned the volume all the way up. Her face finally cracked. "That's fake." Her voice broke apart, wild and uncontrolled now. But this time, nobody stood with her. One of the guards stepped forward, not to block me. To block her. Ryan stood there looking hollowed out. I looked at him and said, "You didn't forget me. You just needed me gone." He didn't deny it, not even once. I put my phone away and walked toward the front door. This time, nobody tried to stop me. The wind outside was cold. I stood on the steps and looked at the house. It was still mine. At least for now, it was. My phone vibrated once. A message from Claire. Just one line. "They knew you'd come back." I stared at the words. My fingertips felt cold. I didn't reply. I only lifted my head slowly and looked back into the house. She was being taken away, but she was still smiling. Small, calm, familiar. Exactly like she had smiled on the porch. That was when I realized she wasn't afraid at all. It was like she had known this step was only part of something bigger. I looked down and opened the video again. The timestamp was 3 full months before I returned home. I never appeared in any records during that time. For those 3 months, where had I been? There was no answer. I stood there in the wind and finally understood. They were never waiting for me to come back. They were waiting for another version of me to return.